All right, so Palmer, I think we've all heard of what you and your brother and your sister-in-law are building, but it seems like we only get an update maybe once a year. So give us an update about Chenmark and about what you're doing.
Sure. Last year, for me personally, relatively busy. For the last 4 years ending in December, I was running one of our companies, Mainly Grass, a lawn care company in New England, and was successfully trained up one of our CEOs in training, and he didn't get pilfered to go run a new acquisition of ours, so successfully transitioned, handed the reins over to him, and then actually stepped in to run another one of our companies, Seabreeze up in Portland, which is a commercial landscape maintenance company, because that CEO was pilfered to go run another one of our acquisitions. So I guess I'm hopscotching around running businesses, plugging holes while we develop CEOs to take over for me.
And what does Chenmark look like today? Things you want to, disclose: number of companies, number of employees, revenue, you name it.
Sure. So yeah, I guess our lawn and landscape number is up there, but I'm not going to give you Chenmark revenue. 10 companies throughout a bunch of different industries and a bunch of different geographies. So we're in Western Canada, we're in Florida, we're in Tennessee. We have a bunch of different companies in New England. A lot of seasonal businesses, so the employee count was going to fluctuate heavily, but I'd say at peak season across the board, you're looking at probably 550, 600 employees. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So Sean, we know Palmer and we know Chenmark, but we don't know you very well. Tell us about you.
Sure. So I joined Chenmark in early 2021. I was coming from a company called Aries Management, working on restructuring and workouts. So basically the problem children of the private equity world and trying to turn those around. So quite different from what I'm doing today, but joined the CEO training program that Palmer just referenced called the GVP program. I heard about Chenmark on a podcast, thought it sounded really interesting. I like the operational side of my job a lot more than the spreadsheet and legal doc side of my job, even though I do like nerding out on spreadsheets. But I like the operational side. I like that it was more long-term focused. I like that I wasn't only dealing with fire drills and problems all the time. And so, just thought it could be a really good fit. And the more that I got to know the people at Chenmark, the more I felt like could be a long-term fit. So joined with the idea of going through the CEO training program, came to Chenmark in Portland, was there for a little while, then moved to Cape Cod and was the CFO at a commercial landscaping business there, and then moved to Florida and was running a boat tour business that we just acquired in 2022. And then this is a bit unusual, but actually came back to Portland to help at the holding company just because, growing a lot and there's bandwidth constraints. And so now helping with a little bit of everything there.
I gotta just step in and give some props to Sean, because Sean set the land speed record of GVPs going through the GVP program and becoming a CEO. We're hiring like crazy for that program, and Sean and I are both on the hiring squad to hire those people. And one of the questions we get asked a lot is, how long does it take? And we've designed the program and guide people towards roughly 12 months in each segment, so roughly 2 years before you become CEO. Sean did it in less than a year, so well-deserved, well-earned, and I know he's not going to say that himself, so I figured I might as well do it for him.
That's pretty neat, but you chose to go from Wall Street to boat tours.
I did indeed.
Pirate ships.
Pirate ships.
Specifically.
Like pirates drive the ships?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very much a pirate-themed cruise for families. And if you haven't been to Destin, go to the Buccaneer Pirate Cruise when you're there. It's phenomenal.
All right, so I think
They sell alcohol on the boat, too.
So everybody here who wants to buy a small business has in their mind what it's going to be like day to day from a people management perspective. And we'll get to GVP because that's a big part of how Chenmark has grown. But what was the biggest challenge or the biggest learning curve going from Aries to, let me get this right, Buccaneer?
Yeah, so I guess, the benefit of the GVP program is that it comes in stages, right? So first you're in Portland and you're working directly with some of the small businesses, so you start to get a feel for what that's like. Previously, I was on the road about half the time working with middle market private equity companies, so had, seen what good looks like, work with management teams, but I hadn't managed a team at an operating company. So it's a very, very different thing. But so first, you get to get some exposure, work with small businesses, and then in stage 2, as I went to the landscaping company, that was very much a steep learning curve of, okay, now you're managing a team, now you're dealing with people, now you have, people in your office coming to you with issues basically my entire workday, and then I go home and catch up on closing the books at night. So it's a very different experience. I think really the big thing for me was people management. I think if you're coming from a finance background, that's just not something you're going to get a lot of. Yeah, maybe you have an analyst or associate that you're working with. It is a very, very different world in a small business. And that was certainly a learning curve for me, and where I found myself spending a disproportionate amount of my time, and then just trying to balance everything else.
So did you know anything about boats or pirates before you started?
Yeah, I was a pirate growing up, so.
Okay. So how did you relate to a workforce that works on a boat? Seriously.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's an insular culture, boat captains, not the, a bit profane, which is fine.
Mike Bakken.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so 2 separate brands there. There's a Dolphin Cruise, and those are, pretty traditional, captain, worked on oil rigs for a long time, boat guy, but gives a great tour. And then, the crew is generally younger, high school people who want to work on a boat, and they're there to get their work done and make some good money and, make sure their customers have a good time, but they're more, okay, we're business focused. The pirate crews, on the other hand, we're hiring people out of often acting programs. So it's a creative group. It's a very different workforce.
Disney on water.
Yeah, exactly. But it's honestly a lot of fun. I think you have to appreciate what they're doing. And one thing that I did that I think was quite helpful in terms of, 1, relating with them, and 2, kind of making sure I understand the roles and what we're looking for and what the challenges are, was I did every role in the company that I legally could do. So I cannot drive a 100-ton vessel legally because I don't have a license to do that. But I can put on a pirate costume and work behind a bar. And the team loves that. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. I mean, if you can't have fun in a pirate costume, pouring people daiquiris, I don't know what to tell you, but small business isn't for you. So yeah, it was great. Working the ticket booth, worked on the Star, taking photos, selling photos, just a little bit of everything, so to get to relate with the team.
All right, so HoldCos have gotten so popular that there is a conference dedicated to them. Kelsey? But every HoldCo has to start with the first company. What was the first one, and isn't that the one you're running today?
Yeah, that is the one I'm running today.
So tell us about, forget where you've come from, what was that first deal like? How did you find it? What was it? How'd you finance it? And did you act like you were going to just do a deal, or that it was going to become a HoldCo?
Yeah, so terrible answer. Bit of both. So we started Chenmark, James Trish and I started Chenmark, and the idea all along was buy multiple businesses, own them forever, operate them well, recycle free cash flow to buy more businesses, right? So fairly simple idea, not original at all, but just bring it to the small business space. That was 8 years ago, before the word HoldCo existed. And it was certainly at a time in search when that was not considered search either. And I distinctly remember a lot of business school people telling us, professors telling us that what we were doing was wrong. But we did it anyways, probably because we didn't know what a search fund was when we started. So we were already materially down that road. And I guess we were also a little bit, bullheaded. Ignorance is bliss. So found the first deal, Seabreeze, commercially focused landscape maintenance company in Portland, Maine. That's what brought us to Maine. Knew that we were going to move and live wherever we were for the first deal. But that was a unique deal in the sense like we probably wouldn't do that deal again for a couple of reasons. One, it was we were buying it from that Mike just talked about this, like that 40-year-old cohort. It was two brothers, and they wanted to take some chips off the table, and they wanted to help take the next step in their business, but they didn't think that they were the people to do it. We thought, fantastic. Private equity does this all the time. You know, they had the owners roll equity, 20%. It's like tried and true. Doesn't work. Didn't work for us.
What didn't work?
I just don't think small business owners, in my experience, they don't value equity the same way we do, so it didn't align incentives the way we thought it would. And they were selling their business, I think, because they wanted to take a step back. And when you're sort of asking them to work just as hard as they used to work before, and they don't own 100% of the business anymore, they're kind of like, well, WTF is this for? And we weren't operating in the business either. So, probably should have thought about that more and better, and probably would have done it differently. Certainly, Trish and I have since then run businesses ourselves, and that experience has been really transformative for Chenmark in a number of different ways. So, like, we probably should have run that business ourselves, and we didn't, especially because there was three of us.
So the three of you bought a business, and none of you ran the business.
Yeah, I'd say we were like very active consultants. But we very quickly bought another business and another business. But again, I think we probably should have just bought the one and run it. So when I say like a bit of both is, they rolled equity. We did get some debt, not a ton of it. We're generally fairly conservative, and when you sign a PG for the first time, it's pretty real. But then I very quickly bought a couple others and realized, all right, we in order for us to scale Chenmark and to sort of realize this vision, we're going to have to sort of rethink how we operate, and that's where the HoldCo model came in, and we started buying companies underneath one umbrella, and then sort of, I think we're going to talk about it later, but then very quickly realized the CEO position for our model and how we operate is a very pivotal position, and developing those internally became the very obvious choice, as opposed to either having sellers stay on to run businesses or trying to hire those people directly from the street. We tried that too and failed pretty miserably. And so, when in doubt, don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So let's start bringing people in and developing them internally. So now the only way to become a CEO of a Chenmark business is to work in Chenmark first.
So before we move on to the HoldCo and GVP, how did you know that you were ready for deal number 2? Or did you ever feel ready for deal number 2?
Honestly, we probably weren't ready. We just did it. And I think Trish has probably got the best mindset for this of, don't waste a lot of time thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong, because like a lot of things are going to go wrong. Just figure it out. I'm probably like more of the freak out kind of person in that. And then James is probably somewhere in the middle. That's what's helpful about having 3 people, is that we generally always naturally have a spread, and so we sort of balance each other out nicely. So I think in hindsight, we probably weren't ready. Ignorance is bliss. We were young, we were hungry. I think I've said this on some podcasts. Actually, I think both Will's and Alex's, that in hindsight, people ask like sort of what was it about you guys? And I think really 2 things, like a willingness to bet on ourselves and a fairly high comfort with delayed gratification. I think those were for us the key ingredients to getting the start.
So HoldCos require deals, businesses, obviously, to scale. But it seems like for a lot of us who are trying to build those HoldCos, it's people that are the sort of hardest piece of the puzzle to scale. So let's talk about GVP, or Generalist Vice President Program. Sean, what is it? Why did you guys start it? Tell us about it.
Well, I can't talk to why they started it, other than I guess had some bad experiences with trying to hire people off the street, and it's just hard to get to know somebody that well in an interview process. So that's my understanding. They wanted to really know people over the period of years by the time they installed them as a CEO. I think Tony made a comment that is applicable, that investors like lines, not dots, right? So if you know somebody a period of time, you can see them progressing. You really know that person. You feel a lot more comfortable installing them as the CEO. So what the program is today, and I think it's quite similar to the original inception when it was developed, is it's a 3-stage program. Stage 1, move to Portland, get to know the team, get to know the culture, Chenmark makes sure you kind of have the right attitude, you have the aptitude to be a successful small business leader, that they're comfortable sending you to an operating company as a representative of Chenmark. If that all goes well, and I guess I should back up, while you're in Portland, you're working on search and helping operating companies with whatever they need help with. Generally some type of ad hoc, one-off project. You're not trying to be installed on a run rate activity because you're going to be moving on in 6 to 12 months. So if that all goes well and you're enjoying it and Chenmark thinks that you'd be a good fit going forward as an operator or as a leader in a small business, then you move to somewhere in North America. Could be Florida, could be Western Canada, it could be New England. And you take a leadership role, and that can take a lot of different forms. It could be a plant manager, a general manager of a branch, a head of sales, head of operations, head of finance, a lot of finance positions, just given the background of some of the people coming into the GVP program, though it is really quite diverse, which I think is great. So that's stage 2, and then if that goes well, then you are moving to stage 3, which is the ideally final landing spot. You are running a small business somewhere, and that is a great long-term fit personally and professionally. So those are kind of the 3 stages of the program.
Yeah, so I'll say a bit of the why. Yeah, we did have some bad experiences hiring people directly, had some false starts with trying to work with owners who wanted to stay on. But I think also our model is very heavily predicated on a decentralized operational model. So we put a lot of autonomy and authority in the CEO's hands. So making sure that we have that right person, both from an attitude and aptitude perspective, is important. And I guess our experience, that maybe we're just not good enough interviewers to do that, in one fell swoop, so they can go in. I think the other benefit is just culturally. I think it's great to establish a culture where we develop our own, and there's a tried and true path to grow from within. And yes, we have a GVP program, and the defined goal of that is to develop CEOs. But because of that, we also have opportunities for employees who don't come into the Chenmark ecosystem via that avenue can also become CEOs. So the person that replaced Sean as the CEO of the company he used to run, it was not a GVP. Right, worked at a boat tour business just as a general manager that was hired directly, and then has become great and a phenomenal person to go run a business for us. So it's yes, we have this defined CEO development program, but I think more generally it's a culture of trying to develop people and give people opportunities to progress in their career.
There are a lot of searchers in the crowd who are going to leave here and probably think, gosh, it would be great to own 70% of a small company doing $5 million of revenue, and if that mini LBO works out for me, it's a wealth-generating event. But then there are a lot of downsides. There's sort of PGs and having to take this big cannonball plunge into small business ownership, and they might choose to go do it for somebody else, like you guys, but they still want incentive. They want some skin in the game, and I would guess you guys do too. So how do you incentivize your operators?
So everything in Chenmark is free cash flow based. That's the North Star that we measure ourselves by. And as an operator, your compensation is tied directly to the free cash flow that your operating company specifically generates every year. And then you also have the opportunity, if you'd like, to invest in Chenmark at the holding company level as well. So I think that those are how the incentive structure works.
So you're saying if you're an operator of an operating business, you can invest in the holding company that owns multiple businesses? If so, how does that work?
Yeah, so that's the only stock you can invest in, and the only people who can invest in that stock are employees. So, like I said, the original idea was to recycle cash flow and be a long-term capital compounding play, and so that's transpired. So, the equity that goes into our next acquisition is internally funded. So we don't raise external capital. So the only people that have access to equity are our employees. And yes, it's CEOs, but we're expanding that to increasingly larger pools of our entire 600-person team.
And have you found that to be as useful of a tool, alignment-wise?
Yeah. So I think For CEOs, it's pretty simplistic. You earn your compensation based on the performance of the company you're running. That's pretty obvious, right? You gotta earn your keep that way. But then if you believe in the story of Chenmark, and that gets paid out in cash. And so you have the option, but not the obligation, to turn that into stock. So, and we do that. There's a tax drag component to that a lot of people say that it's a dumb thing. Why don't you give options or whatever? But I think it's really powerful to give the choice back to the employee, whether it's the CEO or someone on the senior leadership team of the business, because they have opportunities to buy stock too. That if they want to use that cash to go buy a house or send their kid to college or whatever, they can do that. But they can also, if they believe in the story of Chenmark and they want to buy into that, they can. And we also we make a market in our own stock every single year. I didn't realize Brent Beshore did it. I stole it from Motley Fool, which is where I heard about it the first time. But it's a two-way market, so sellers can sell, buyers can buy. So that does add another layer of liquidity.
Pretty unique. I can tell you, I've tried to think about copying that model. There's a lot of details that go into it that are tough. So you must have to value your HoldCo every year to get the equity priced. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so you can do a third-party valuation. I find them to be very expensive with limited benefit, seeing as we value companies all the time. So we just have a formula. It's a very simple multiple. It's been fixed for a number of years, so everyone knows, all right, based on these financial metrics, this is what the value of Chenmark's going to be. And we don't have options. There's no like adjusted EPS or anything like that back from my Wall Street days. So we try and make it, I'm a big believer in the KISS, the keep it simple, stupid model. So we try and keep it as simple as possible.
Makes sense. So what is the profile of operator that you want applying and coming through GVP? And just as importantly, what is the profile that has flamed out, not worked, not a good fit?
So I can start with the profile of what we're looking for.
Thanks. You're going to make me take the other one?
Yeah, you can take the other one.
Got it.
So what we're looking for is first a cultural fit. So Palmer mentioned we have a hiring squad of 5 people who interview every candidate plus our HR director. And what we are primarily focused on is values alignment. So each one of us sort of focuses our interview around a specific value and make sure that that candidate is aligned, broadly speaking, with the Chenmark core values, that they're bought in to what we're trying to do. And beyond that, we're looking for a baseline level of analytical ability. So there's a case study component to the process. And then, there's probably a whole range of different criteria that each of us weight more heavily. But, the typical things that you're looking for is somebody authentic. Are they humble? Do they have grit? All sorts of those things, but it really starts with the core values.
Yeah, so I guess the flame out, the easy answer is like not bad, and that's sort of why we've sort of gravitated, and I've answered this question a lot, so I'll sort of condense it because Sean answered a bit of it, but I bucket into 2 components. There's an attitude and aptitude. The aptitude piece is like there is a level of intellectual and analytical horsepower and rigor that's necessary to do the job. And when you're in the CEO seat, a lot of stuff comes at you all the time. And in small businesses, oftentimes there's very few people. In fact, a lot of times there's one person, the CEO, whose job it is to see the whole field. So you have to take in a lot of information, properly contextualize it to make sure you're picking up on the signal and not the noise, and sort of build a foundation of understanding that you for sure don't have, because it's an industry you definitely don't have any exposure to until being a CEO there. Reason from first principles, and then turn around and be able to communicate that in a clear and concise way to your team so they're all working on the right things too. So there is just a general level of horsepower that's necessary. Frankly, for me, the more important thing is the character piece, and Sean stole 2 of mine. I say this in the hiring squad all the time. My 3 are humility, authenticity, and selflessness. I think those are crucial in a small business.
So how do you filter for those on a piece of paper or in an interview? That's really, really hard.
Super hard. And to be honest, we still don't have a good answer. Our hiring process has been phenomenally successful, and I honestly think it's the process as opposed to each individual. If you ask any one of the 5 people in the hiring squad, Sean and I are 2, Trish is another one, we would all say that we're terrible interviewers, and I totally believe that. I don't have the same list of questions that I ask everyone. I have really 2 or 3 that I ask everyone, and then I kind of see where the conversation goes. And everyone else is kind of the same way, and we're kind of embarrassed that we're not more structured in how we do it, but our process is very structured. And the one thing we are very firm about is that none of the 5 of us talk to each other until we've interacted with the applicant and we've submitted our submission. And so we get 5 distinct opinions of people. And I think the wisdom of the crowds plays really well. And it's precisely because we try not to cross-pollinate of what I'm looking for is different than what Sean's looking for. And we shouldn't actually be looking for the same thing. But hopefully if we get 5 different people who have 5 different biases in terms of what they think is most important to be a CEO, the wisdom of the crowd sort of bleeds out. And so when we're reviewing that candidate, very quickly it comes out that the right person it's obvious when you look at it, but when you're the one person of 5, it might not be so obvious.
And I think a huge benefit too is I made a massive mistake last summer and ran what I thought was an unbelievable hiring process and slammed them right into the driver's seat. And it was a bad car crash quickly. You guys get to put them in the back seat first, then the passenger seat, and then the driver's seat. And have you found that progression creates better outcomes?
It's a nice analogy. I might steal that. I think so. I mean, yeah, if like Palmer said, we have hired really, really well. I think the GVP cohorts have been phenomenal. I don't know if that's more lucky than good. Hopefully a little bit of both. But yes, I mean, if it does flame out with somebody and they're at Chenmark working on deals, that's okay. But if we, made a really bad decision and saw that person as a CEO, that's a lot less okay. And that's a lot harder to unwind, and you've, really undermined the trust of everybody at that company.
So one thing I say a lot is one person or a small group of people can have a really outsized impact on a small business. It's one of the things I love about small business. The catch is that there's no guarantee that impact is positive, right? So you have to make sure you're putting the right person, especially in our model where we are very decentralized. We are, we're putting a lot of autonomy in the CEO's hands. It's just very important. So I think some people think of the program as sort of like you're holding me back, like I'm meant to be a CEO. But I think the people we bring in, and Sean, you can say if you agree or not, I think they appreciate the program because I think it makes them more ready. You can't be perfectly ready. I've now had 2 GVPs serve as my CFOs at various companies who've gone on to be CEOs. And they've been in the room, in all the decisions, but they haven't been the CEO until they actually took that step. And both of them, within the first 90-day period of being a CEO, they both called me up and said a version of the same thing of like, holy shit, I did not realize how much shit comes at you as a CEO. So I think there's the degree that nothing prepares you for it, but like we try and prepare people as much as possible so it's not just like the most overwhelming experience.
Okay, so back to the HoldCo, and we talked about a decentralized approach today, but I remember, I think it was on Bridgman's podcast where you guys talked about shared services, which sounds pretty centralized to me. So how is that shaken out?
Yeah, so we do have a shared services team. It's 5 people, 3 of them in IT and technology, 2 really in IT, 1 in technology, 1 in HR, which is really honestly mostly recruiting for the CEO and training candidates, and then 1 in marketing. The way we refer to them is sort of like they're internal consultants. So they shouldn't be taking on, for us, they shouldn't be taking on any day-to-day responsibility in any of their operating companies, because then that's going to suck up their bandwidth and tie them up so that they can't help any of the other 9 companies that would want some help. So it's meant to be sort of a resource that they can tap that our companies otherwise might not either have the budget to invest in, or even if they have the budget, they don't have enough work to really get the R on the I, right? So like, yeah, they might be able to hire a full stack engineer to do some custom stuff for them, but like, do they have enough custom stuff that has enough of a payoff to make that hire a valuable return on investment? Probably not. But so that's where we have that at Chenmark. So I'd say it's still fairly decentralized. It's sort of more of just like some captive resources that they can tap on a sort of ad hoc or consultancy basis.
Have you guys tried to insource or share services that didn't work? What were those and why?
Yeah, so we own 3 landscaping companies. So like everyone's like, why don't you consolidate them? Why don't you consolidate them? And then I got sucked into trying at least consolidating whole goods purchases. So like they all buy mowers, so let's all buy the same mowers. It lasted. I was able to like strong arm our companies into doing it for like a year and a half, and then they want to make their own decision, and like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I think the autonomy piece is important. I think there's a bit of like Darwinism of keep 3 different companies separate. They actually are slightly different landscaping companies that do, one's totally residential, one's totally commercial, and one's kind of in the middle. As I think it's just easier, keep them separate, make them have their own decisions. And yeah, there might be some leakage. It's supposed to like, could they buy a mower a little bit cheaper if they all bought the same mower together? Sure, but at what cost? Probably not worth it.
Yeah, I would also just add to that as, somebody who was interested in the space and ultimately went through the GVP program, autonomy is a big piece of what attracted me to the space in the first place. I, was working in finance, not a ton of autonomy there, right? So I wanted to run my own business, to have an impact, to make those decisions. If it's, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to dictate all that to you, that's not really very attractive for me personally, and I don't think it would be very interesting for the vast majority of the people we're hiring. And if that is the setup, I think we're attracting a very different candidate that we, at least right now, don't really want to attract.
Yeah, we're mostly entrepreneurs here, so we were terrible employees.
Yeah.
It works great because it's more scalable that way, right? You hire great people, they want autonomy, they're great, so you want to give them autonomy. So the big thing is make sure you don't make a wrong hire and put them in a position where they can do a lot of damage. Like I said, we've been successful, so yeah, it works great, right? Like decentralized, give them the reins, tell them to trust their instincts. And
I know there are a couple HoldCo folks in the audience who probably want to ask some questions.
Yeah, so I can start with that. I did consider both paths. I think two primary pieces to it. The first one for me is I've always been a team sports guy. I always preferred to be on a team. The idea of doing a search completely on my own was just not very interesting to me. It just sounded, to be frank, a bit lonely. And I like working with really smart, hardworking people and being able to bounce ideas off them. So the fact that I have 10 other CEOs that I got on a call with once a month and talked about important things going on and problem solve together was awesome for me, and I really enjoyed it. The fact that I could call another boat tour captain at another business and talk about engine failure was great, because I don't know. At the time I took over, and probably still today, don't know a ton about boat mechanics. So the fact that I had that resource available is awesome. And I am certainly not a tech expert. So the fact that I have a really, truly incredible resource to be able to call and to help with projects was awesome. So that was the first piece, the fact that it's team oriented. The second big piece for me is, I guess if you're a finance person, that your risk-adjusted return there, in my opinion, is quite attractive. So if you're going and doing something on your own, we've talked about, the downside case, right? You obviously hope that doesn't happen, but it is very possible, and especially if you're putting up PGs. But even if you aren't, there is a very wide range. Tony talked this morning about that bell curve. Well, you hope that you're on the good side of that curve, but you very well may not be. If you're going to a company like Chenmark, your range of outcomes is much narrower, and so your risk-adjusted return, in my opinion, is much better. Both because they've done it, so they've sourced deals, they understand the industries that they're playing in, and there's a lot of other networks, or sorry, a lot of other resources that can support you. So the big one for me is the team aspect, and then secondarily, I think from a risk-adjusted return perspective, it's quite attractive.
Justin.
Hi, Justin Vogt, Austin, Texas. You mentioned you may not do, or you probably wouldn't do the first deal again. Could you tell us a little bit about how the acquisition criteria scorecard, how you evaluate new platform acquisitions has changed over the last 8 years and across many deals?
Yeah, probably not as much as that phrase would suggest. I meant that because we would not do a deal where a seller wanted to stay on. So that's the primary reason why I said that. When we talk to those people, like, oh, I think I might want to stay on indefinitely. It's like, that's fine, right? We're probably not the best fit for you, or when you are ready to take a step, away, that's probably when it's going to be a better fit for us. So that would be the big one. In terms of other dynamics of business, wouldn't say this is necessarily different than the beginning. We've just seen a lot more of these, and we've written about them in our weekly thoughts. We call them bait and tackle shops. So companies that have really high returns on capital, but maybe don't have tons of reinvestment opportunities, especially organic, just because of the nature of the business. Those can be really attractive opportunities for Chenmark and for the CEO, but pretty bad opportunities for traditional search, where you have to hit sort of the classic 35% IRR. It's going to be very hard to do that in a business that doesn't have a lot of reinvestment opportunities. But in the Chenmark umbrella, that's great. It's a source of cash that can then go fund other acquisitions somewhere else. So I think that's an area that's been attractive to us, and we've done a bunch of those, and of course have found out that there's actually been interesting inorganic and reinvestment opportunities in those businesses. So we went in thinking these are going to be bait and tackle shops, and then they turned out to be bait and tackle shops with other proximal bait and tackle shops next door to them. So they actually have had reinvestment opportunities within the franchise. So I think that's a type of business that I think plays well to the Chenmark model that might be a little different than the typical search criteria.
Jason out of Atlanta. We have a countertop and cabinet business that Mike mentioned. Since you're prepping so many people, I don't know, so many is the right word, you're prepping people to become a CEO, train them, set them there, give them the reins, high level autonomy. Do you then have an issue with people leaving to go do it themselves after they know they're good at it?
I don't know, are you leaving us?
Thanks for blowing up my spot. To date, no. I think definitely something that we think about, but I think if we are articulating the long-term vision and strategy and giving people a compelling opportunity to buy into a diversified holding company that is compounding capital at a really attractive rate, and they are part of a culture where they enjoy going to work every day, why would they leave? That's my perspective. So I am excited to go to work and work with the people that I get to work with, and I have a lot of fun doing it, and I find myself when I'm not at work thinking about work in a good way, not in my previous life in a dread way. So I think that's awesome. And so if I'm having fun what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it and I'm able to reinvest in a larger organization that I really believe in the long-term vision, where I really believe in the long-term vision, and the returns are pretty exceptional, then I think that's a compelling reason, at least for me, and I think so far for others as well.
Thank God. I'm sure it will happen at some point, right? So 5 of our 10 businesses are run by GVPs right now. None of them have been run by GVP for more than 2 years. So I think we're very long-term oriented. So just to say that we've seen this play out over a long time is inauthentic. So I'm sure it will happen. I think our focus, I know our focus is to make sure we're providing opportunities for people to grow in their careers. So hopefully they're in a business where they can grow in their career in that business, right? And so can you just be a CEO for a long period of time and enjoy that and enjoy the growth of that business? But if not, are there maybe other businesses that you can step into or other roles within Chenmark where you can continue to add value? And we've just seen that with one of our CEOs going from CEO to a different CEO position. That's why I'm running the business I'm running now. So I think as hopefully people within Chenmark see that and they see there's opportunity, and what we really care about is making sure that our operating companies are performing well and that people have opportunities to progress in their career. And again, that internal growth development is very important to our culture.
Hi, Alex from Atlanta. So I'm an executive recruiter, so I'm so interested in this. But my question is, sorry, this is really loud right by the speaker. For whenever you guys are looking for the candidates that you're going to be interviewing, what is it that's the baseline that your HR person essentially is going to say, hey, they were a collegiate athlete, Ivy League school, they're about 6 years in, corporate FP&A, wanting to be an entrepreneur? Or is it something that you say, hey, this guy's been running a $10 million business, he's got a degree from a local school, and he's got a great personality. So, what gets them through the door and on that first conversation with you guys just on a piece of paper?
Yeah, so currently we have very diverse backgrounds in the GVP program. So there are people who came from the Ivy League schools, and there are people who did not. And actually, some people who graduated college and then ran their own landscaping business and sold that and then wanted to do something else and then joined the program. Some people who came from professional sports and, had more to learn in the business world, went through an MBA, but then wanted to join a team and but clearly had some exceptional grit and tenacity that are traits that we look for and were ultimately aligned with our values. So long-winded answer, but I guess the short answer is we're not looking for, oh, you didn't go to Harvard, that's a shame, you're not a fit. It's very, very diverse, and if we feel like you pass sort of the baseline thresholds from an analytical perspective, and from an ability to communicate clearly and concisely, then it doesn't really matter what your background is. You could be coming from anywhere. And I actually think it's quite beneficial that we have people coming from very diverse backgrounds, in that it makes us better decision makers overall. If we were all coming from the exact same background and had the exact same narrow perspective on things, I think we would ultimately get worse outcomes.
Yeah, I think just really quick, I think it's probably less about what's on the resume in terms of like that first phone call, what gets them into the second round is going to be a genuine interest in small business and an authentic desire to be an operator. And that can get conveyed in a lot of different ways. I'll say we have it's just recently started a junior version of our GVP program. It's called a Generous Associate Program for people a little bit earlier in their careers. And to sort of parlay onto something Sean said. So first of all, if I found someone who ran a $10 million revenue business, I'd 100% get them through the first round, no problem. That's very rare. So if you find those people, I guess refer them to Chenmark. But what we have seen is some people who are sort of much more entrepreneurial, don't have sort of the Ivy League background, but have a ton of grit and started the types of businesses that we would all buy, but they were smaller. So we have one guy who started a lawn care business, grew it to both sub $1 million. Same thing, a guy who started a pool cleaning business, sub $1 million. And they're just very entrepreneurial, but wanted to take the next step in their career and realize it probably wasn't going to be just themselves. And so they've both been phenomenal additions to the Chenmark team. And they have a background that would be very different than they certainly don't have FP&A experience. They certainly don't have a business school degree. They certainly didn't work at Ares or at JP Morgan. I think that's great. JP Morgan taught me a lot of things, but it didn't teach me how to run a small business. So, and I didn't go to business school. So it'd be really asinine for me to say you need to go to business school to run a small business.
Hey, Emmanuel Gunn, Orlando, Florida. Very intrigued by all of this as well, and think you all are running a great model. Playing a little bit off of Jason's question and the nuance of the people who are going through the GVP program, is your deal pipeline able to keep up with that? And how are you all projecting that out in the long run as you all are bringing on cohorts and keeping people hungry and sort of following through with, hey, once you complete this program in 1 or 2 years, you will actually have an opportunity to get plugged in somewhere. How do you all project that, and how does that process look?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a balance, right? So you're constantly balancing since we're internally funded, the cash flow being generated from the operating companies with the opportunities we have to reinvest that cash flow, and that can come in a number of different ways, and the people that you have coming into the program to ultimately take over those small businesses that you're buying. So I think I can't say we're getting it perfect and everything is lined up perfectly all the time, but it's just a constant balance, right? So we've hired a lot of good people. Okay, maybe we feel like we're not where we need to be in search. How do we dial that up? Okay, so we have a search team. We have everybody who comes in as an associate or a vice president is involved in search. We're looking at broker deals. We're looking at inbound deals. We're doing outreach that's been talked about at this conference already in a similar way. So if we're falling behind in one category or another, then we're looking at how do we turn up the dial to make sure that we're balancing things out. But it's a constant juggling act, which makes it kind of fun.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is my view is of those three, by hiring in the people, good people create good opportunities, right? So they end up adding value to the operating companies that they're in before they become CEOs, which then kicks off more free cash. And then they end up, when they're in phase one and they're helping out on the search effort, they end up helping to find more and better deals. So like for me, it all starts with the people, and like it's a self-fulfilling cycle that good people will lead to the other two legs of the stool balancing themselves out.
Yeah, I would say we've maybe at points in time felt like we had too many good people, but they go quick, and they're sucked into operating companies and they're adding a ton of value, and it feels like it's hard to have too many great people. Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about this seasonal?
We both have experience with that. You want to go? You go first, I'll go second. Different businesses, different ramps.
Yeah. So much less of a ramp for my business, but we were saying a cyclical, seasonal business. Ideally, with as many people as you can, when they're leaving at the end of your season, you're talking to them about their plans for next year and if they'd like to come back, and you're trying to stay in communication with them. Hopefully they're responding to you. And then, you have an idea of, okay, I don't need to go find 60% of my workforce from scratch. I have, of that, 80% of it already spoken for, and these people have recommitted for the upcoming season. And now I know, Jan 1, what I need to start hiring for so that I can hit the ground running when spring break hits. So at least that's how I thought about it.
Yeah, so mainly grass is probably like the biggest example of that. We have like 60 technicians that we can't keep on in the winter. Just there's not enough summer months to make that business model work. So it sucks, right? The seasonal position, it's like the worst bitter pill of being CEO and having to lay off a lot of your staff. The way I've tried to handle it, certainly what Sean's saying, like people leave bosses more than they leave jobs. So try and make sure you have a good culture where they feel like they still have room to grow, even if they're in a seasonal business. And again, talking about developing talent internally, we had a technician at Mainly Grass go from seasonal tech to then being what we call an account manager, which is like an inside sales, customer service rep hybrid, to now being our director of marketing at Mainly Grass. And so the more stories like that get out there, I think that there's more of a compelling understanding that this can be a career for me. And the other thing that sort of evolved over time is especially in that business, I actively looked for ways to increase wages. Because like I don't hide the fact that it's a shit deal that a lot of those technicians get of not having a year-round job. So how can I make it as compelling of a position for them as possible? How can I structure the business in a way and put them in a position to be so successful that I can afford to pay them a lot more than other lawn care companies can pay them? And hopefully that sort of takes the tinge out of the seasonal position, that combined with some opportunities to progress into other roles within the company. There's no silver bullet. Like going on yeah, I mean, so our HR manager spends a lot of time with them before we make sure we give them a lot of heads up so we know this is going to be the last day of the season, even if and it's hard to really know what that date's going to be. So even if we get through our work before that date, we've committed to that date. So we'll keep them on and we'll keep paying them even if there's no work because we committed to a certain date. And then our HR manager does spend a lot of time going through, hey, if you want to file for unemployment, this is what needs to happen. This is how you need to fill out the paperwork. It's a very strict process. If you fill it out wrong, it's going to jam you up for a while. So a lot of our HR manager's capacity is taken up in administering and helping our employees do that. I'd say like to me, that's sort of like the last resort. I try and do as much as I can. We do as much as we can to help set them up for other jobs in the winter. TBD, or not TBD, it's sort of like hit or miss whether or not they really want to do that. So we try and place them as best we can.
Thanks for the conversation and for sharing in public the way you guys do.